What's up guys? In this video I want to explain very quickly just some of the basics of lenses and what the numbers mean on the lenses. So congratulations, you've bought your first DSLR camera or mirrorless camera that hopefully has at least one interchangeable lens. Now on all of these lenses there are several different numbers, and I would like to briefly explain what each of those means. I think just about always these numbers are written directly on the lens. And for example, on this Sigma lens, it's written right here. And it says 30 millimeter, 1, and then a colon, 1.4, and then some other stuff. One other number that's here is a diameter of 62. It's got a little symbol that's a circle through a slash with it. And now that's the first number I'm going to explain for you. And it's also probably the least important, especially when you're getting ready to begin in photography. That diameter that it's showing there is basically the lens filter diameter or size. And that is basically right here on the lens. There is a filter that I've put on this lens. Now I can unscrew it, I can put it on, and the reason I knew which size to buy for this filter was that diameter. It's a 62 millimeter diameter, which means that when I go onto Amazon, that 62 millimeters will tell me what filter size I need, if I need a filter. So just a pro tip, the filter that I put on all of my lenses is a UV filter. And what this does is it's essentially a clear filter, but it protects the original lens behind it. The other reason why you need that diameter is just in case, for example, like my sister, she dropped her lens cap, which is this piece here, that when you're storing your camera, it protects the lens. She dropped it down the Grand Canyon accidentally. So that number is the one she would have used to purchase a new lens cap. Now guys, like I said before, I've explained the filter diameter now. It is one of the least important numbers you will need in order to get started with photography. Now most DSLR starter kits will come with a lens kind of like this, and it is an 18 to 55 millimeter lens. And you'll see that written on the lens. It's 18 to 55 millimeter. So generally for zoom lenses, this is a range of distance. What this represents is what's called the focal length. And that in layman's terms is sort of the zoom. So that will determine how far in a lens is zoomed or can zoom. So for example, on this 18 to 55, the minimum focal length is 18. And when you zoom in to something, it's 55. The higher the number of millimeters, the more that zoom is. And that is with respect to the focal length. Now remember, I don't want you to get confused with the first number that I just explained. And the way you know the difference is that the diameter that I explained first is denoted with a circle with a line through it. This one has nothing of the sort next to it and generally is a range of numbers. Now there are some lenses, for example, this prime lens, the first lens that I showed you, that it does not zoom at all. There is no zoom on it at all. It's what's called a prime lens, and it has no zooming ability. However, it does have a 30 millimeter focal length. And what that means is that it's already set to a certain level of zoom, or if you want to call it that, and you can't move it from there. These lenses are really great for when you have room to walk around or you don't really need to zoom into anything. Now going back to this kit lens, back at 18 millimeters, you're talking about a very wide angle. And then when you zoom in to about 55, you are now zooming in, you are sort of narrowing in that field of view in order to focus on one item or object. So to put it simply, focal length is sort of the same as zoom. The next number I'd like to talk about, and definitely my favorite, is aperture. Think of the aperture of your lens as the pupils of your eye. The larger the aperture, the wider that pupil is. The smaller the aperture, the more narrow that pupil is. And just like your eye, the function of aperture, like your pupil, is to allow light into the diaphragm of the camera or your eye. So if you're in a darker setting, for example, it's definitely beneficial to have that pupil nice and wide. But then on the other hand, let's just say you've gotten an eye exam and they had to dilate your pupils and you go outside and now suddenly you're overly sensitive to light. Similarly, if the aperture of the lens is too high or you've adjusted it too high, then you're allowing too much light into the camera and you'll see a washed out image. For that reason, the number that's noted on your camera is actually the maximum aperture, which means that the camera can actually adjust that number to be smaller. Aperture is also the characteristic that determines the amount of that blur effect, also called bokeh, that everybody loves to take on portrait photos, for example. Like portrait mode on an iPhone sort of tries to mimic that bokeh effect. If it just had a really good aperture on their lenses, they wouldn't even have to mimic it. They would be able to do it naturally. And that's what aperture on a lens can do for you. The way aperture is denoted on this particular lens is that there is a 1 and then a colon, and then it says 3.5 to 5.6. That 3.5 to 5.6 is that range of maximum aperture. And the reason why they give you that is because as you zoom in, that aperture actually tends to get a little bit smaller. Not by a lot, but it does get a little bit smaller, and it doesn't allow as much light in. Now, of course, you can take that number up, meaning you can make the aperture smaller and within the camera and still adjust that. Now, the last thing to remember about aperture is that the numbers that are given to you, the lower they are, the wider the aperture is. The higher they are, the more narrow the aperture is. So for example, right here, I have a lens that has a maximum aperture of 1.4, and in this hand has a maximum aperture of 3.5. That means that this one, even though it's a lower number, is actually a wider aperture. And over here, I've got one that has a narrower aperture. So guys, I hope that briefly helps you and explains for you what these numbers do. And I hope to expand as well in a series of more videos about this. To help you with these 3 numbers and these concepts, I've created a cheat sheet for you, which you can download in the description below. And guys, if you have any questions at all, or comments, or even criticisms of my videos, please do not hesitate to comment in the comment section below. And of course, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell for notifications. Thanks for watching, guys.